This is the Valley Run Podcast from the ministry of Rocky Mountain Church in Estes Park, Colorado. Whether you're making your valley run for groceries, kids' games, or just need to get out of town, we pray today's message encourages you to elevate your awe for Christ in all things. Online at RockyMountainChurch.com. Here's your host, Pastor A.J. Dudek.
Welcome to the Valley Run Podcast, the show where we dive into a variety of topics to help you live out your Christian life. And this month we're talking about relationships in regards to parenting our kids and teenagers. And today we're honored to have a very special guest, Dr. Ken Wilgus, who is a clinical psychologist, speaker, author, and parenting expert. Dr. Wilgus is best known for his groundbreaking book, Feeding the Mouth That Bites You. And it's a complete guide to parenting adolescents and then launching them into the real world. He's got decades of experience counseling families, teens, and parents. And Dr. Wilgus offers a bold, practical, and I think deeply insightful approach to one of the most challenging seasons of your parenting existence, and that is your teenagers. Ever found yourself lost trying to balance authority versus freedom and trust with your teenager? This conversation, I think, could be beneficial for you. So today, we're talking about how to stop parenting your teen and moving towards purposeful approach, and why doing so might be the best gift you can give both of them and yourself. So grab a cup of coffee, take a deep breath, and let's get into it. I want to introduce Dr. Ken a little bit more. Like mentioned, he is a practicing and licensed psychologist, sought-after speaker, and author of the book, Feeding the Mouth That Bites You. With over 30 years of clinical experience in and out of churches in his private practice, Dr. Wilgus specializes in adolescent behavior, family dynamics, and parenting strategies. He is known for his clear yet compassionate and often humorous approach to helping families navigate the teenage years with wisdom and grace. Last year at Rocky Mountain Church, Dr. Wilgus was here with us, and we did a seminar on marriage. Dr. Wilgus is going to be with us here on the 15th of September, once again at Rocky Mountain Church, doing a seminar on the things we are talking about today, which is parenting your teen. And so we are grateful to have him on the episode. Let's welcome Dr. Wilgus. Welcome back to the Valley Run Podcast. Like mentioned, we are joined with Dr. Ken Wilgus today. Dr. Ken, thank you for jumping on with us.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, like I had mentioned in our intro, you spent some time here with our church body last year talking about marriage. You're coming this Sunday to talk about parenting teens. And I always ask our guests this initial question: what's your favorite Estes Park memory that you can think of over the years?
Wow. It might be when we went to the Keys Hotel. What is the old place that's had several names? And there was some musician guy that kind of owns it and had two other. Anyway, it was like three country. I'm not even a huge country guy. I mean, I live in Texas, but still country musicians sitting there in this relatively small ballroom. And it was just a blast. Only
awesome.
only in Estes Park, I'm figuring.
That's right. I think you're talking about the Seven Keys, maybe up.
That's it. Clearly,
part with
huge
Mark.
memory for me. Yeah, the something, and it was great.
Yep, it's a great place, and they've done a good job taking it over and kind of building a good reputation. And so that's awesome, man. Well, hey, let's jump right in. I'm going to ask you right off the bat, having read your book and listened to some of the podcasts on parenting teenagers at different platforms and your own podcast, what inspired you to write Feeding the Mouth That Bites You? And why do you think so many parents struggle with the transition from little ones through the teenage years?
Okay, I'm really glad you asked that, because number one, I didn't want to work with teenagers. When I finished graduate school at the University of Texas and I'm looking for placements in my internship, I was like, I want to work generally with adults and whatever, but my field is dominated by women. And everywhere I went, it was like, ooh, we have this guy. And so sure enough, even though I tried to avoid it, I ended up in Chicago, and half my work was with adolescents. You know how it is when God does something and you're like, this is wrong. And so I'm sitting there in the adolescent treatment. And then there's this moment where there's a few things that the other therapists or parents are saying. And some tiny voice in me just kind of went, yeah, that's not going to work. That like I just kind of thought, I have an instinct here that seems to make some sense. So then I started working with adolescents and others and so forth. And for a long, and well, I started by doing training. Feeding them out to bite you started as parent training back in the 90s when parents would take a whole Friday night and an all day Saturday just to learn about how to parent their teenagers. This is back in the James Dobson days and all this stuff. And people always said, well, why don't you write a book? And my answer was, there are a stack of books. Why would I do that? Well, this is what I'm getting to. Because there's a lot of general good parenting stuff that misses the one thing. My book is not a magic book at all, but it does emphasize and do the thing that I couldn't find enough anywhere else. You must put your teenager's need for eventual independence at the top of your list. Their desire for autonomy is not the same as their desire for success and connection. Autonomy has to always be kept in the forefront, even when your teenager isn't talking like that. So that's a long way to get at. I didn't choose this. It chose me. And secondly, I wouldn't have added to this mountain of stuff except for to try to get one main point across, that we live in a culture that does not know how to translate their children into adults. And it is the source of not all, but a big chunk of what parents struggle with, even what they think is, quote, normal struggles with teenagers.
Yeah, no, that's a very well needed call. I mean, I've seen that in pastoral ministry and helping parents navigate. You mentioned this concept of planned emancipation.
Yes.
Can you explain what that means and why it's so crucial for having your trajectory be release, not more grabbing or holding? Why is that such a struggle for parents as they see their kids get older? The tendency seems to be to restrict more than to
Yes.
move them towards freedom and, as you put it, planned emancipation.
Well, and Christian parents have a habit of being highly motivated to over control because, in the belief that this is what God is counting on us to do. What they don't know is this idea of holding on and force parenting in every aspect for children that are 13, 15, 17, 27. That's incredibly new. No one in the planet, and especially in biblical times, ever thought that this is what parenting is. First of all, parenting wasn't invented until 1970 something. Teenager wasn't invented until 1942. So this concept that we have really is a post-industrial side effect of not knowing how to give our teenagers the message, you're not a child anymore, but you are, and we are working our way out of your life. So planned emancipation is kind of a cultural correction that you try to make in your house to put into your house that timeline that is actually out there. Your kid will reach after high school, for virtually everyone listening, it's after high school, where you don't have the control over them that you do now. And any over kind of responsive teenager after that, like in the 20s, that still does what you say and stays in your basement, that's not because of your great parenting. That's because you have a weak young adult. And of course, lastly, in this age, I don't know if you noticed, but it's getting darker out there. People think Christians are nuts, and we cannot afford to be putting out kind of weak-willed, obedient adults that go and find some kind of charismatic personality, girlfriend, heaven forbid, or whatever, that
Yep.
then just they fall to that. Our young, by 13, 14, among other things, we need to really be asking our teenager, do you think that, do you agree with this? Are you even on the same page? What do you, like, let them know you can disagree, because knowing that my parents know that we may differ is the only way they can really think through the most important burden, which is, how do you say your relationship with God is, and how do you get there?
Yeah, and you're teaching them something that's countercultural, which is with social media, with oftentimes education, they're forced into buckets.
That's
acting a
true.
certain way, believing certain things. And so when you sit them down and you ask them a question at 13 or 14, hey, what do you think about this? You think this is true? What questions do you
And if
have?
they say, I don't know, then you go, really? Well, then I'll ask you next week. But seriously, you're too old to just go, I don't know. What do you like? Help them to know you mean it.
Yeah, no, that's really good. I mean, it's hard to start these things when they're 15 and 16. What practices when they're 2 or 3 should parents be thinking about as far as trajectory? I know those years are tiring. I've got 3 kids and many
Yeah.
sleepless nights and
Yeah.
disciplining our kids when we're tired and exhausted. In those little years, little 1 years, what are some pillars that you could give our listeners to help with this idea of release once they hit 12, 13, 14 years
By the
old?
way, when you have little ones, don't you hate when someone comes up and goes, you need to really appreciate and enjoy these times? I'm always like,
Right.
what does that mean? What do I
Right.
do?
Right.
But here,
Exactly.
I'm glad you asked that because my answer may surprise you. This is not the kind of thing that you start early and then by the time it's 13 and 14 and whatever, you've built to that. It actually is a significant shift by 13 or 14. And that
Mm,
shift is needs to be built on parents. The good parenting is all. I mean, we've got reams of research look
right.
up authoritative parenting.
Yes.
Authoritative parenting as opposed to authoritarian, which is that yelling dad that's always, just getting mad, or the chaotic family that's like, we'll pick whichever shoe, sweetie, and it's all fun. It's like authoritative is highly involved, has high expectations, catches their children doing the right thing and reward them, has appropriate consequences when they are doing the wrong thing, and follow them. This current, we always look for new memes. Lighthouse parenting, I think, is what they're currently calling it. That's what you do. And part of that is, especially when we come to planned emancipation, is confidently establishing yourself over your children as their authority. I have
Mm,
no problem with telling a 5-year old because I said so,
yes.
because by the time they reach 13, it is super powerful for that parent that they trust that, he's always been the one that tells me what to do and how to do things and rewards me, all this stuff, and encourages me. Those parents now sit down and say, we are now moving out of your life in a slow, orderly retreat. We don't
Mm,
mean we're going to let you do more stuff. They've already been doing that. That's called privilege. We mean that more of this must be up to you regardless of what we say, and you give over those areas of freedom, because it's like I say, it's really powerful if you've been an authoritative parent, because it's like, wow, you who have established relative trust that you have my best interest at heart, you're now giving me the message that I must rule over me more and more. So, because if you have what is now a lot more softer parenting, gentle parenting, all that kind of thing, it
yes.
really doesn't have as much impact, because it's these parents that have been my servants for the last 12 years now saying, you get to do it yourself. Well, as you may notice, our 16-year-olds very often don't even go for driver's license. And many at times it's because I know where I was on my 16th birthday, I was at the DMV. I was there for
Yes.
my little
Oh,
unofficial, freedom passport. But
yep.
I hear teenagers now saying things like, well, why would I do that? I'm just going to have to, cart my sister around. They're used to being, taken care of by these adults who never expect them to be on their same level. So I hope that that's a long answer to your question. But ironically, it is not that you start early giving them more freedom. You don't give small children freedom. That's privilege. Privilege
Mm,
is, hey, I'll let you go over to your grandmom's house down the road because I trust you to do the thing I think you should do. Adolescents, young adults, it's a different thing. I no longer expect that you would do exactly what I say. You have to work through what you say before God. And for a lot of parents listening, that's always a little odd. Like, huh,
mm.
my parents never told me that. Yeah, that's right. They didn't. And neither did your grandparents. But your great grandparents probably did hear that in the culture. It's just we're a long period into confusion here.
So the hope is by the time they get to those teenage years, you've done some good groundwork in helping them train their emotions towards independence
Yes.
and
Yes.
own their faith. Like I always tell parents with little ones, like the cute misbehaving 3-year old, that's not going to be cute when they hit puberty.
And no
Like,
one will want to be around them.
that's exactly it. And so helping train them to freedom, to your point, and I think you make a great point. Yeah, you're not just saying, hey, go hang out with whoever you want at 5 years old, do whatever you want at 5, but there's a
Right.
training of emotions where you're helping them understand the world doesn't revolve around me and I can't manipulate the family unit with my emotions. I need to take ownership of them and my faith. So
Right.
when I get to be a teenager, it means something to me.
Well, and Christian parents need to not be afraid to point out often that your behavior is doing this to the people around you. That's
Mm.
currently out of fashion. The Canadian psychologist Jordan Peterson, who I'm not a huge fan of, he's not a Christian, he has a lot of right-wing-ish stuff. However, he wrote this book, 12 Rules for Living, and rule number 5, I believe it is genius. It's titled, Do Not Let Your Children Do Things That Make You Not Like Them. And it's
Mm.
like, yeah. And he has this whole bunch of research about, even by the age of 4, if you're not working for your child to have enough self-control, gratitude, say you're sorry, whether they mean it or not, then you won't like them. And trust me, nobody else will like them. And it'll affect their entire support system. Well, he doesn't get into what's more important to Christians, which is your goal is to help your children to be able to be part of the body of Christ, where
Mm.
you have self-control, you have compassion for those around you, you're not just thinking about you. That's a critical part of childhood, so that then by adolescence, which is young adulthood, they can then establish their own, how they see themselves and all that, where you're kind of shepherding or coaching them, really trying to be alongside them, but always giving them the message. We're doing this because before you know it, we're out of your life, as
Yeah.
far as forced parenting and requirement.
No, and that helps create a garden, right, versus a prison cell.
That's exactly right.
Gardens can flourish. There's still boundaries. And we even see that in the creation narrative, right? There's boundaries, but there's a lot of freedom there. More freedom than I think parents are
There's more
comfortable
freedom
giving.
than I wanted. Did you ever pray and ask God to please don't let me be such an idiot and he's like,
Yes.
no, I'm not going to make that happen. Anyway, the Spirit does. But I think the other thing is that parents listening, they're under so much pressure. There's so much information out there. The social media is like the Wild West now, where it's like, someone blows in, I don't even know who you are, but he's selling snake oil, and here's the 3 things you need to know. And parents are just overburdened with all of this false confidence, as if science. I always talk about the burden of parenting, which is a false idea that there's this information based in science, whatever that's supposed to mean, that will actually help you to engineer your children into the things that you want them to be. That is a complete lie. It is a falsehood. And yet parents, especially mothers, really carry a burden of that, because I hope he's right, but what if I'm that one mom that didn't do the thing that then, it really it makes it that much more important that parents really carry the proper role in participating in what God is doing in the life of a child that you do not know how they're going to turn out. It is not up to you. He's not counting on you to make it happen. You participate enthusiastically, but one screw up, oh my gosh, this number of screw ups I made, it's not going to ruin everything. It could never be that way.
Yeah. So your kids are a little bit more resilient than you assume. And that's
Ask anyone older. They're like, wow, that's not what I thought was going to happen. And in my case, it was like, I've got many stories, and even in my book, where what turned out, even though I tried to keep that from happening, was way better than I thought, way better. And it just wasn't my plan. Yeah, that's often the goal of parenting, is in another area where God shows you, hey, look at me, keep your eyes here, you're good.
Yeah, no, that's a really great point. In your experience, whether it be in the church or clinical, what are some biggest mistakes well-meaning parents make when trying to stay in control of their teens?
The most common, and maybe one of the reasons I wrote the book, is the most common parenting mistake that I see is using childhood parenting techniques with adolescents, where I used to have trouble. I'd have to remind him 3 times when he was a kid to go clean his room. Now I have to do it 15 times and scream, and I checked his hearing. It's like, no, this isn't just the same thing. You must change your approach, and very openly with this young adult. we now see you as a young adult. And that means that these things will change. There's still absolute limits for sure, but
Right.
you're not going to remind. And one of the things I talk about is you're no longer a cop with teenagers where you have to make sure the rules are followed, and you're a judge. Your main role is to go, whoa, look at the time. It's already 10 minutes after you're supposed to have your phone on the charger. So that means you lose, and that's it. You don't start with, you know, we believe God has put us in charge. No, you just lay
Yeah.
out the consequence and don't
Yeah.
get into stuff. So I think it's continuing to use childhood parenting techniques, teenagers, and even believing that the incredible lack of effectiveness is just normal. That has not been normal ever in time, and it isn't normal in. There's over 100 cultures now that don't have teenagers like we call them. They're not having this problem.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
It's almost like secret information no one's telling people.
How do you think culturally, what was the tipping point? I mean, is it generational? Is it cultural? Is it ideologies that have seeped into Christendom and just education? What do you think, in your experience, tipped the scales to parents being confused about the trajectory of their kids?
Okay, that's a good way to put it. Well, I think the seed was planted after the Industrial Revolution. So forever and ever, if you have a basically agrarian culture, children were a benefit because you needed the workers. And so, my grandfather, born in 1901 in Indian Territory, he and his brother had to feed the hogs and do several things before going to school. That's not because my great grandfather read a book on parenting. That's because we needed them to do this. So them being a part as soon as they could, joining in the work, is just historically always been the case. Only after the Industrial Revolution did we have the option now where we have young people who are young adults by 13, but they're really not ready to join into the stuff that we're doing. There's a longer period of training. So you had, in the night where they'd go off to another family to live there and work as an apprentice, things like that. So there was an extended training period needed, but that was always still carried a certain amount of you're not in the same position you were before. It really wasn't, at least in this country, until after World War II, where we've become the most wealthy. We've not had war on our shores, and frankly, teenager was created as a marketing category because they got money, they got time, and they don't have to do anything. And so but the seed was no longer absolutely requiring our children to get by. And then it just got more narcissistic after that.
Yeah.
And we have to be much more intentional about a lot of things that used to be almost just part of life.
At what age do you start talking to your child about this transition from childhood expectations, childhood behavior towards this is where you're headed, and eventually it
Yes.
means out of our house and out of
Yes.
our umbrella of authority? What age is important to start having those conversations?
I think you can start at any age. I think it has more to do with when will it mean anything. If you have a 4-year-old I suppose if they're preschool, it may be a little unnerving to talk about, we're going to leave you. What do you mean? You're going to walk out of the house? So, but certainly by grade school, 9 or 10, it's certainly when you get pushback about, you guys never let me do stuff and whatever, you can certainly both reinforce that, look, we told you, I know you don't agree, but we think this is what's right for you. But then you can start throwing in, by the way, at 10, it's only about 3 more years and more of these things will begin to be up to you. So I think it's fine to, as soon as it makes sense to an older child, I think it's important. It's especially important if you have teenagers and children, that your children see the teenager being given things that they do not have. There's always going to be, especially that middle child, that actually is better behaved than the older one. And you don't let me do this. It's like, it's not about privilege. You're right. You are a very good student, but
Yes.
We're not nagging your sister about homework because she's 15, not because she's really good at school. And there'll be an age when they don't like that as children, but they will also hit adolescence. And it is always comforting to know there is a path to grow up in this house and I won't have to get away. And that's an important message. We're telling you, you can grow up here and you won't have to get away just to feel like a grown up.
And that creates a safe place for trust, a safe place for them to process struggles, ask questions,
and communicate in general.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so you might have some parents listening to this and they feel like, man, I've blown this. I've not done a great job. How does a parent practically begin the process of giving more freedom to their teenager without it feeling like I've lost all control, going from one ditch to the other, which for them, just there's this turmoil of chaos, of unknown, of guilt and shame maybe as a parent. Where do they start? Where do you begin?
Yeah, the very first place is, and I'll always talk about this, is that you start with the recognition of the sovereignty of God. Nothing we're talking about here should fall for Christian parents, should fall in the category of, no, it's all lost. I have screwed up. You were never given that much control to engineer your children. God does not do that. Relax. But number two, all this is talking about is helping parents with what is otherwise standard American 20 and 21st century parenting. In other words, it isn't like every person, like many of the parents hearing this, they didn't get that. If they ask themselves the question, when did I know that I was fully an adult equal to my parents? There will be listeners now going, still not there. So what they're giving these young adults, they may have never felt themselves. So start by cutting yourself a break. This is hopefully a positive change to help you gain much more effectiveness. It's not, again, that fake parenting, oh no, now there's this new thing this guy's talking about and I screwed up. That's not what we're talking about. But then secondly, let's say you've got a 17-year-old or whatever, you start immediately. It's never too late. The best is to start at 13. You know, my son, we went to a barbecue. We don't have bar mitzvahs, but we do have barbecue. And so my son and his uncles and my father-in-law and, all these people were there with letters that just said, man, you're now a man and whatever. That's all ceremonial, like a bar mitzvah. If you've ever been to a bar mitzvah, it's really great. You should go. But just like those Jewish kids, so many of them went home to a household that still treated them exactly like a child. It's not just the ceremony, it's doing it. But at whatever age, you can go in, and that's actually in the book. There's the ideal way to do it, and here's what you do. Because the point is to, as soon as you recognize that this hidden message is sort of oxygen for your teenager, then just start right in. One of my favorites is a little speech that goes, hey, we heard this shrink guy, and he thinks that when we try to be helpful, it looks to you like we think you're a kid. And if that's the way it comes across, we're really sorry. We don't want to do that because we know that you're a young adult. And so we want to start reinforcing that now. It's never too late.
Yeah, no, and that gives them the freedom to choose moving into adulthood, right? Because
they have to move into adulthood.
Yeah.
You're right. I'm kind of splitting hairs, but they must move into adulthood. It really is about hearing from their parents. We know that you are there. That's a huge difference. There's a lot of ways of talking about it that, if you're going to enter into adulthood, if they are 13, they have entered into adulthood. No culture ever thought that a 14, 15-year-old was the same as a child. The message really is, we see that you are an adult. Well, what if they have ADD and they're real impulsive? Then you can tell your kid, hey, we think you're an adult. We think you're an immature and very impulsive adult. So we're worried about you. But it's no reason to go, look, you're 15, but you're actually 12. That's not true. No one in the culture is going to agree. When you're 18, you vote because you're 18. You don't pass a test. And so adulthood is coming, and we need to kind of merge onto that lane by the way we treat you at our house.
And in your book, you use, I think, the terminology, you're moving from the manager to the consultant.
I think that's kind of how it's.
Yeah. And what does that shift look like day to day in family life? I mean, you've mentioned some very practical things. I think one of the things you mentioned, which is I really think is a good point, is just be direct about
very much
expectations. Don't live in the gray so much.
Yes,
because that's confusing to them. It's hard to manage for you as parents if everything's in the gray. And we're learning that with our kids. We've got a 15-year-old, a a 12-year-old who's going to be 13 and a 6-year-old, and they're all
Yeah.
at different stages. But yeah, having good boundaries, clear expectations, living in the black and white. What other things could you suggest to our parents when they are making this transition and owning this move from managerial parenting to consulting?
Probably the biggest thing you're talking about with Gray is if you think about a teenager, somewhere in their mind is thinking about when you're speaking to him, is this have to or is this up to me? Is this advice? And you really want to be upfront before you say the rest by defining this is have to or this is not have to. So on the discipline area, very commonly it's that thing that I don't want to, I'm not going to punish you. But if you leave your shoes, you can't keep leaving your shoes. You're trying to use words to emphasize something. If that's basically why you yell. A whole lot of parents end up yelling because they're not willing to pull the trigger on a minor consequence. And it's certainly, as we know, yelling does not help your teenager. Oh, wow. I never realized now that you yelled it at that volume, I really understand that. That's not how it works. The middle ground is to come up front by going, listen, you're not in trouble because I already told you, if you forget your stuff, I'm not bringing it to you. That's your deal. But just between you and me, I'm worried about that. That's advice. And parents, very often, that's mostly what they're trying to get across to their teenager. Well, you need to practice saying up front, hey, this is just advice. It's up to you. Or don't be afraid to say, listen, I already told you that when you have that phone in your room overnight, it's going to cost you 3 days without your phone. So that's because it's not a have to. So I think most of the time the gray is getting out of the gray is being better at giving advice and labeling as advice, or at reasonably giving a consequence that isn't, earth shattering. It's just, I already told you can't do that. Sorry. Pretty soon it'll be up to you, but not yet.
It's like the consequences of them parking and getting a parking ticket by the city, right?
Yes.
It's accountability with a little teeth. And in that parenting shift, you're consulting with that same philosophy of, hey, to the phone analogy, the standards. The standard is no phone in the room at night. You've broken the standard, therefore, here are the consequences.
And by the way, I know you think the standard is ridiculous. I get it.
Yes.
You think your mother and I are crazy. I fully understand that. There's a whole bunch of research backing up our crazy, but I'm not going to argue with you. But we're crazy enough that we're not kidding. We told you your phone would be gone for 3 days. It's gone for 3 days. Again, you don't have to agree with me. Sometimes parents of teenagers will still say, well, see, this marks rebellion. They're pushing against the truth. No, these are adults going, that's your truth. When will you recognize I have my own truth? Right now, I get it. It's between you and God. However, that's my phone. So that's, things like that.
That's hard for teenagers living in a culture that they're totally taught time and time again, your truth is the truth.
That's
you can
right.
Be you. You can, form your own identity independent.
Which is a whole different thing. That's right.
Yeah. And so it bleeds into that. We talked about this on our last episode with a guest about forming identity in our kids. When you think about giving them freedom, how much of an importance is it to teach them their identity in Christ, as we are essentially, and the Bible uses this picture of shooting arrows over the wall, shooting our kids into the real world.
Yeah.
How do we help form them and build confidence in their identity in Christ as we kind of send them out into the world?
So that's often a kind of generalized question that really is kind of hiding what if my kid's gay or trans? And so identity is actually the basis of what you do with your children. I don't know that where there's now a new set of speeches you give that really give your kids confidence. My identity, number one, was in the church. I don't think you can substitute for, if you're a Christian and you're not hanging a lot with the body of Christ, that's not going to work well, no matter what identity speech you give. I was Bob and Sandra Wilgus' boy. Aren't you Bob's boy? It's like, yeah, that's who I was. By all these uncles and aunts that were just the people at church. Your identity is really found in your experience. What people mostly are dealing with now is that there's a new kind of cultural religion that actually is sort of a pagan thing. You have this North Star deep within you of authentic you. And, nobody, for example, is out there saying, hey, you should be gay. They're saying, what if you genuinely are that, then you need to honor that and whatever. That's a different religion. And I think it's really important that with our children, if you really are balanced in teaching them the faith, but your identity is in the faith. The difficulty is that many of us, we may not struggle with identity or sexual identity issues. Many of us are like big on, I've got to maintain at least upper middle class. I mean, isn't that what Jesus, there's just a ton of identities that are kind of burning on the front lawn every Sunday that, you don't get in here with, I'm a rich Christian, I'm an American Christian, I'm a gay Christian. Now, all those things, so that's less of a new teaching per se than it is really them being grounded in knowing who they are with their family and their parents. And then at a certain point, I think we do have to address to our kids this alternate religion. When I do have parents who have a kid that is, there's a big chunk of teenagers that aren't gay or trans, but they absolutely believe that that's fine if you are. And it's really hard to know how to answer that without feeling like a Klansman, like, oh, I can't believe you're hanging out. I don't want to be a jerk. But the parents that have that in their kid, the biggest issue is not, oh, no, you shouldn't be trans. It's, oh, my Lord, I thought you were a believer. Well, I am. No. Apparently what you say, Jesus, and when I say Jesus, we're not talking the same thing. You cannot be.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's a different thing. So identity is what you are, in fact, building in them all along, regardless of any extra thing you're saying.
So you're accountable too as a parent, right? So like there's a structure here of we're accountable to God as we raise our kids. They are under our leadership,
authority,
coaching,
yes,
authority, all of those things. So as parents, we're not immune to being under God's authority. And our hope is that as we build a garden over the prison cell picture, the fruits of the Spirit are on display. It's like a real thing you can taste. It's a real thing.
And teenagers can tell. Yes, they can tell. You preach grace, but I brought home an F on my report card and you freaked out. I think we know what's really true here.
Yes.
So it's important that's right. They'll see that fruit. They may not be able to articulate it, but they can tell what you really believe in.
I've had some interesting conversations with a few now post-teenagers in young adulthood, early 20s, where their parents never graduated from manager to coach in their relationship, but they want that to still happen. They feel like their parents are still over-parenting. How would you give advice to the young adult, as we flip the coin here, to have a conversation with their parents?
Where that happens a lot is rich parents, especially first generation wealth. They have the ability. I don't have this problem as much with poor parents, because when your parents have kind of monetary influence over you, not saying it, we do think it, whatever, that's really hard. But I think the conversation to have with your parents really needs to start with gratitude. That most all the time, just to be blunt, it's mostly your mother that's doing this, because moms are nurturant, whatever, and dads aren't great at going, honey, you got to respect her. So you're talking to a parent that is trying to give you love. She is just telling you, sweetie, we don't put that in the recipe. I can't believe you're doing that with the children. I think you start by thanking your parents. We love that you care this much. But then you also let them know something that not only do they not necessarily see, they still may not see it. And that is the way that you're intervening here is like you don't respect us. I got an email from a lady who listens to the podcast who's not sure what to do when she lets her teenage kids go down the block to their grandmother. She absolutely lets them use her phone and all the stuff that's not allowed at her house. That's not a grandmother who doesn't love her daughter. It's a mother who doesn't respect her daughter. And so I think it's important to be grateful, but also to let them know that I need you to back up what we are doing with our kids and not undermine us, even though I get it that you don't agree with us. And that says a lot about your own adultness. If you're too freaked out about it, then that's almost still a dependence. Like, it shouldn't be a surprise to you that your parents are going to still hold on to some stuff. That doesn't mean you're wrong. God doesn't go, well, wait a minute, I don't think your dad likes that. You're 30. It's between you and God. So I think your confidence in that can reflect some of your own security in yourself. God has said you are not a child anymore. The natural progress is to move from your mother and father and cling to your family, your husband, your
Mm.
wife. That's the way it's always been from Genesis 2 on.
Yeah. No, that's a good distinction, and I think deep down, naturally, a lot of our young people want to transition into adulthood. They just haven't been told it's possible, right? And
Well,
even
that's right.
in your clinicianal work, like the age of accountability keeps getting older and older and older in the
Isn't
in
that
the
weird? It's
in the DSM
crazy.
5 and all this stuff, and just trying to figure out, like, are you saying that adulthood now is like 25 or 26 years
Some
old? Like,
people actually are kind of saying that. And in my
yeah,
book, I have a whole section called Brain Science, Trauma, and Other Rabbit Holes. There's just this whole new thing that we don't tell our kids that they're not going to be able to be adults. We just say you have six of diagnoses and
mm,
you have to do all this. And it just says you are weak. And
yeah,
parents aren't intending to do that. But I've got a whole bunch of stuff I have to do. And they don't see that the overall is as if we're saying that, yeah, no, actually adulthood is doesn't go till, that whole brain research now about 24, 23.
yeah,
I'd explain that whole, it took a year of the news cycle to finally come around and recognize that all this reporting that the underdeveloped frontal lobe is why teenagers are so out of control was inaccurate, because teenagers are not way more out of control than other age adults learning new things. But that didn't make headlines. The headline was, wow, brain science shows that our young adult teenagers are babies. No, they're not.
no.
We love that stuff.
Well, and I always bring it back to the garden, right? Where God created this world. He puts Adam and Eve into the garden, and he gives them more freedom than we could ever imagine. I think in our
Right.
culture, sometimes Christians wouldn't know what to do with that amount of freedom. And
Yes.
even in our own salvation, it's freedom in Christ that is such a massive part of our growth and our identity and our future. And building that type of life with our families and our kids is so vital. And so I just want to thank you, brother, for being on the podcast today. If you could give one message to every Christian parent raising teens today, what would it be?
Uh, it would be, look at the lesson from Abraham with his son Isaac, who God told him to sacrifice him. And Abraham just got up and went. And there's that one point when we find out what's he thinking. And he tells the young man, wait here, the boy and I will go and worship, and we will return to you. And the two lessons from that is, one, sacrificing your expectations, your needs about your children it is worship. It is telling God, God has the right to ask, who's more important to you, your children or me? And looking for what God is doing in your child's life instead of always measuring whether you've succeeded is an act of worship. And the other that Abraham, we don't find out till Hebrews 11, Abraham actually knew, you sacrifice your kid to God, you really think you're not going to have raised up? Abraham thought he would raise his son back, give him back from the dead. Do you really think God isn't going to give back to you a child way better than you thought, with a story you never would have wanted, but yet it is way better? Just watch for what Abraham learned, is just let it go and watch, do your part, but watch what God is doing. Half of wisdom is just getting tired. You just, never mind. I'm not going to keep trying to control everything. It's just, you got to watch what the Lord does.
Oh, that's great advice. Where can people find your book, your podcast, information about what you do?
Well, anyone
Where can
listening to
they
this
go?
that doesn't know how to get a podcast, just ask your child. They know where podcasts are. And the book, it's on Amazon. It was published through Tyndale and Focus on the Family, so it's on Tyndale's website. And there's the audio book. I love audiobooks. Most every book I tell you I read, I listen to. I'm big on listening. So of course there's an audiobook.
That's great, Dr. Wilgus. Well, hey, we're super excited to have you here this Sunday. Thanks for your time, your wisdom, your expertise in this area of parenting our teenage kids with the goal of sending them into a future that's full of freedom and bright and confident. And so we thank you for joining us on this episode of the Valley Run podcast.
Hey, I like your church. I'm looking forward to it. Good people.
Yeah, well, thank you, and have a great rest of your day.